Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Zalman Pollack. Zalman, thank you for coming in studio.
It is an absolute pleasure. This is a professional setup. This looks beautiful. It's gorgeous in here.
Well, way too much time in the YouTube. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a universe, but you know, it's funny. I think that a lot of people make fun. This is a good segue. A lot of people make fun of when you find a passion project or when you have a dream of building something. Obviously, like, I didn't quit my day job. I'm not a full-time podcaster. I didn't build a $50,000 studio. Like, if you look around, you can see, like, this is obviously what's on camera. That's what's the beauty about technology. But it's like, you know, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do it. It's not dangerous, illegal, immoral, anything like that. And, like, people make fun. But then, you know what's great? Those people become listeners. So we're fine with that.
Yeah, Timu's finest in here.
Exactly right. Exactly. Timu's finest. Whatever. We digress. But anyone who's listening is invited in studio. So Zalman, the first question we begin on all podcasts is very important because it sets the stage. I believe that hustle is inherent in people. Just some people embrace it from a young age, and some people hide it. I'm not talking just about Little League baseball or softball, things like that. You've been a hustler from a very young age. Where does that come from? Like, take us back. Where does that actually come from in you? That's like, oh, I want to spend my Sunday mornings being in a choir, like in a famous choir, like things like that. Where does that?
It's interesting that you bring that. Like, that's the first question. It's like, I don't even know if people realize how deep that hustle went to getting into the choir. I'll tell you that in a second. But where it comes from, I think honestly, it comes from being the youngest of 6 kids.
How can I get attention? Well, I'm going to make mom and dad drive me to choir every week.
Yeah, the story behind it, if you don't mind, I'll tell you that story. That, like, that first initial hustle was like, I don't know. At some point, I decided as a kid that I have a good voice. That I decided. Nobody told me. I sing at like Shabbos, like Zmiris with my family, and I was like, that's it. I'm pretty good at this.
Are the Pollacks musical? I don't even know this. Are the Pollacks musical?
Yeah, my father's an unbelievable Baal Tefillah. A Baal Koreh. He's also a Baal Tekiah par excellence, as you are.
I don't know about that,
but he, I'm saying my father always loved to sing, and all my siblings really loved to sing. But I kind of like, I guess I just always took a little bit everything too seriously. So therefore, I took myself a little bit too seriously as well. So as a kid, I knew that there was I said I have a good voice. I want to be in Miami Boys Choir. And really the dream started. I went to a couple of concerts as a kid, and I was like, this looks amazing. I want to be on stage. And so I decided, I asked my father, I said, you know, who in Staten Island was in Miami Boys Choir? And he's like, Zalman, like, what are you talking about? I said, no problem. I'll find out myself. So I asked my siblings, and I found a couple people in the community whose kids were in the Miami Boys Choir. And I went over to them on a Shabbos, I remember. And I went over to one of the fathers and I said, hi, can I please have Yerachmiel Begun's phone number? I would like to try out for the choir.
Head of Miami Boys Choir.
Head of Miami Boys Choir.
How old are you now?
Begun. I was
Around.
9 years old.
Okay. Sure.
My son, for reference, my oldest son is 9, and I cannot ever imagine him doing this. But I got his number. First he pushed me off. He's like, oh, yeah, sure. I'll give it to you. So I called him. I looked it up in the phone book. I'm old enough to say that I looked it up in a phone book, and I got his number. And I
forced my siblings off the house phone. To be able to use
exactly,
it. Okay.
Exactly. Well, I was the youngest of 6, but like most of my siblings were out of the house, so just with my sister, I had to get off the phone. So I called Yerachmiel, and I left a message saying, hi, my name is Zalman Pollack. I would like to try out for the Miami Boys Choir. And a day or two later, there was a message on the answering machine saying, hi, this is Yerachmiel Begun. Tryouts are being held at Beis Yaakov of 18th Avenue. And you're invited to come try out. And my father's like, Zalman, why is there a message from Yerachmiel Begun on our phone? I said, because I called. You said I could try. So here, we tried. And the rest is really history from there.
Okay, we're going to unpack that. Most people would not have done that.
I would agree.
Why? But why did you do it? Meaning, you thought it was cool, or you were like, there's something inside of me that when I sing, you know, a lot of people, obviously, it's a very small percentage of people that become, and we're going to get to this, make a career, or I'm not going to call it a side hustle because it's not a side hustle at this point. It's a second career to you of being a singer. Many people dream of that. Like I also sang in the shower. Like, my brother and I, there was Miami Boys Choir a little bit, but like nobody would actually call. And in fact, there were two guys growing up who I knew that were in Miami Boys Choir. And I think both of them were like approached, or someone came over to them at like camp and was like, you should, because Miami Boys Choir was it. Right? It was like, if you had a good voice, you were a male Jew, like think it was Miami Boys Choir. These guys weren't even, I didn't even think they knew what Miami Boys Choir was when people were asking about it. But it's like, I'm going to do this. And it's not an ego thing. I believe this, and part of the whole keep hustling mindset and mentality is if you define your hustle and you chase it, you'll see success. That doesn't mean your hustle's my hustle.
Right.
But like why? Like when you saw those guys on stage, you were like, I just love that energy, or I think it'd be cool, or I'll be the kid from Staten Island who actually does it. Like what was...
because I think it was just the energy of seeing kids on stage doing something they loved. And to me, singing was something that I loved. It was singing and playing ball. I wasn't going to play sports professionally. So, but
I want to get to that. I also played a lot of ball when I was in high school and in elementary school. And obviously I knew that I was not going to make it to the NBA. But I figured like the pinnacle would be a good Jewish day school basketball player, maybe playing high school, whatever. I think I got there. I mean, I played on the high school basketball team, won a championship in 11th grade and whatever. But like, so you viewed it as your way to becoming a professional singer? Like at then you saw it?
No way at 9 years old did I think that this was going to become something. As a matter of fact, like I remember when I went to high school, I thought it was over. When I mean, there's a whole like trajectory here that we could discuss. Like if we were talking like specifically the singing career, like it just sort of happened. But
no way.
At 8 and 9,
and I'm serious. It just happened.
I'll get into it. But like 8, 9 years old, I don't think I was thinking that this is what I want to do professionally. It was something that I loved. It was something that I knew that when I sang, I don't know that if I like thought this deeply at 8, 9 years old. But like when you look back at it, and I know that today, when I sing, there's just a part of me that's free. It's something that is it just comes out. It's not something I don't want to call it effortless. But it's just something that brings forth my emotion without me having to convey anything.
Well, I love that part of keep hustling. That's what I'm trying to get to is so many people feel that about something and exactly say, I will not have a Grammy winning album, right? The likelihood of that happening when you're 9, yet anything when you're 9 or 19 or 29 or 39, again, assuming that it's moral and ethical and legal and all things like that, what drives you is what's going to inspire your hustle. So I think that it's incredible that at a young age you said, this is not a long-term plan. I'm not dropping out of school, standing on the side. My parents are not going to let me sit on the side of the subway singing with a guitar.
Right.
But this is what drives me. This is what inspires me. This is what brings, as you said, a part of me is freeing.
Right.
Therefore, I'm going to chase that. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I have to make the phone call. It doesn't matter if it's a day, a month, or a year, or 10 years of a career.
It was also
more people need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'm saying it's also just like as an 8, 9-year-old, like you're not burdened by the lack of confidence sometimes. Like maybe some kids are, but like as a kid, the confidence was just there. Like I knew I could do this and I wanted to do it. It doesn't mean like when I got into the choir, I wasn't this like star soloist right away. I sat on the bench for a few years. But
what's it like at the first? Is there like hazing?
Terrible. I mean, is there hazing?
No, I mean the Jewish boys choir version of hazing. It's just like who's the new guy?
No, 100%. So you come in with like a whole bunch of new members, and like there's like the older members, and they're like the seniority. And I actually vividly remember this because there was a friend of mine who was in camp with me, Flatbush Park Day Camp back in the day. And we were both like, oh, we sang in like the choir, and like we both joined my boys choir. But he had like been accepted sort of like a little bit before me. So when we got to like that first, like he's like, oh, all the older members, please come up. And he started going up, and like his brother who was in the choir as well was like, no, not you. Like you go sit down. And he had to sit with all the like, oh, Judah, what's the matter, buddy? Like you're not one of the older members anymore. But we had when you first get there and you're one of the newer members, definitely the older members sometimes could be like a little prankful. And
it's a bunch of 8 to 14-year-old boys in a room.
Yeah.
So I have 2 more early singing questions. This has nothing to do with keep hustling, but I'm just fascinated by this. First of all, any like tragic on stage moment? Not like tragic, obviously, like in the death sense, but like any disaster on stage live moments?
I mean, for me personally, or for just things that I witnessed? Because there was definitely
we'll go both.
We'll go both. Okay. I've got 2 that were okay. One just tragic one was just like kid fell during the dancing, and that was like and he just fell face planted Terrible.
And I'm sorry if I offend Yerachmiel Begun right now, because I am a fan. My kids are fans. The Miami Boys Choir dancing of 90s fame.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Listen, we still got the moves, baby.
Okay, I'm just saying, okay,
I get
fine.
asked to bring that out sometimes, but
Okay, whatever makes you feel
good. my own personal like couple of disasters that I could remember are one. We were doing a concert for Hazinu, which was a deaf organization, which sounds like a joke, but there were people there. We were asked to sing there, and it was a big moment.
I was not
me.
worried about getting canceled on this podcast until this very moment.
This very moment.
I didn't even think you were going to be the guy that was going to be canceled. I'm so sorry.
But it was a concert for this organization, and it was a big moment for me because we were performing together with A.B. Romberg, who I personally
Legend. We got to get him on the pod. Legend.
He absolutely should get him on the pod.
Good.
He's so good, and he's somebody who I really, really looked up to in Jewish music. Still look up to. But it was a big moment because I was getting a solo for his Ani Mamin together with him, kind of. Like, right? He was there playing the piano. He was on side, and I was going to come out and sing the Ani Mamin B'Yamuna, right? And I was super excited. And Yerachmiel, the steps were clear. I start playing the piano. Zalman, you walk out, and you're that first solo. So I said, okay, great. He started playing the piano, and I walk out onto stage, and all of a sudden he just stops and starts having a conversation with A.B. Romberg. Like, oh, hey, B, oh, it's so fun. Like, so I literally was standing there in front of everybody. Everybody knows, like, it's clear I was walking out for a solo. So I just literally went like this. I just like shrugged my shoulders for those who are not watching, but like just shrugged, and the whole crowd just started cracking up. And I walk back. And then he starts playing again, and I come out, and I'm just like, aha, like, and everybody starts like giving me. I got a huge round of applause for it. But so that was one moment. I mean, it's not terrible. And the other one,
I imagine it was worth it to sing Ani Man with A.B.
Yeah, 100%. It was amazing. And then the other moment was I went up for my solo, and the mic was off. So I'm like just sitting there, like, you'd imagine like just empty silence and I mean the music and like. And Yerachmiel's like starts like singing. He gives me his mic, and so he started singing. So I started doing the harmony, and then my mic went back on. And he was like, "Melody." He's like, "Oh no, wait, no, keep doing the harmony. I'm singing the melody."
No, wait, really?
This happened like within a span of 5 seconds.
We're gonna see if we can do good videos, but yeah.
I don't know if there's any videos of this, but it was some nerve-wracking moments for sure. Being on stage, what's funny is like always coming out on stage was the most nerve-wracking part, and I find that about everything. I find it today when I daven for the Umbid. I find it when you play sports. I find it when I sing at a wedding. The beginning of anything is just like and then you start and your instincts take over.
I think I have not performed the way you have. But I think as it relates to performing, there's like that old joke of envision everyone in their underwear. I think that's totally false. I think
they're a terrible idea.
No, if like that energy. I think that, especially, I want to get to weddings in a second because I think that that's an amazing just privilege. But it's the same with davening. It's the same thing with, I always say, and just because you brought up the Baltic thing, and this is not a knock on people who do what you do, because I think that it's far more important and being a high holiday service leader and chazan, but you can mask a lot of problems davening.
100%.
I will just on the point that you're making. When the first sound comes out of the shofar, I have a thing about keep hustling. How like blowing shofar is the same thing because no one really cares about the previous sound. They're only going to remember the last one, or if you mess up in the middle, but when that first sound comes out, it's such a relief because you're like, oh, this is actually going to work. Like I'm not going to be that guy who just, not to digress, but my father, Ola Shalom, was once in shul. And the guy was just bombing to kiss over, and he just left in the middle. Just booked.
Yeah,
booked. The guy just booked.
I can't imagine.
The guy just booked.
I can't do that. It's such a tough gig.
No, I don't know. Whatever. It's less. It's a different energy. But I just had to throw that out there in my own defense. But you still get nervous?
Of course, I still get nervous. Every time you go out there, you want to be your best self.
But no, okay, fine. And I get the awe of some of the davening prayer stuff. I get that. When you go to a wedding, okay, or I was at an event with you recently, you were honestly nervous where you went on there? Or nervous, I think maybe different nerves. Like, you didn't think it was going to bomb.
No, it's not.
Your friends were there. Like, you've already established yourself, I guess, a little bit in that. But
I don't think it's that you think you're going to bomb. It's that you always wanted to make sure, you always want to make sure that you're going to do a great job. Right. And I mean, there's always that fear that maybe maybe your voice is not in shape. Maybe the same way, like with the shofar, that when you get that first sound out and you find it to be clear, I think it's the same thing. Like when you hit that first note and you're like, okay, I'm here. I'm in shape. I think it's just also just always just butterflies, you know?
Yeah.
I'm never gonna, I don't think I'll ever not have them. I could be davening in the same shul that I daven in all the time for a regular musaf, and I'll still be nervous before I bust out. You can work on, you know?
But I feel like that there's a certain level of energy also that at certain events has, which probably helps with the nerves. Like when you come out of a wedding, forget about the ceremony chuppah part, because that's a lot of solo stuff. But I feel like when you're at a wedding and like you can't even hear yourself because the crowd is so energized.
That's awesome.
You're probably like, if one note is off, it doesn't like I want to perform for these people with energy,
Right.
less with perfect vocals, as opposed to when you're performing something else and it's about the vocals. It's more like this has to be perfect vocal.
Yeah, I mean, definitely energy, but that's like to me, yeah. So like the dance sets are never like the nerve-wracking part of the wedding. It's the chuppah when everybody's sitting there waiting for you to make them feel something. And
Or mess up.
Sure. But like I remember for dance sets, I remember the first like real wedding I'll say I did like was with Ari Blanju, Blue Melody.
Great guy.
Great band, great guy.
Energy, by the way. You talk about energy.
Yeah, great.
So like I don't know how many weddings he's done, but every time you're with him, you feel like he's just like
exactly
jamming for the first time.
By the way, that you just hit on that point. It's so important because sometimes I'll come to a wedding, right? Like we said, a second career, but I do have a real day job that requires a lot of attention and stress and it's, you know, when you come to the wedding, sometimes you're just like, oh, you're not feeling it necessarily, but then you get up there and like, you know, I think was it Kobe who said that there's somebody in the stands who hasn't seen me play, or no, maybe it was Jordan.
Yeah,
it was Jordan. Who
one
said,
of them. Yeah,
one of them.
There's some kid over there who has paid a lot of money that's never seen me play.
So I don't know if it's like to that level that some person there out there hasn't seen me sing, and I need them to see me sing. But it's that I want to perform my best for the client that's hiring me to do this.
Hello. People hope to only get married once.
Right.
No, I'm serious. So like,
that's
meaning,
for sure.
It's their one wedding. Meaning,
it's their
I think
one
that it's
wedding,
the same thing.
but it's the client. You know, they're paying you to do something, and I want to be. Forget from like even the financial standpoint, from my own personal standpoint. You want to perform your best every time you go out there. You never want to be somebody who mails it in, and that's something that I hold very strong. But anyway, I digressed. I'll go back to what Ari Blanju told me at that first wedding I did, because first of all, I was very nervous then to do a dance set. And he's like, don't worry about how you sound. Just perform with energy. And I remember like I was super energetic, jumping up and down. I remember like the band members were telling me like, oh yeah, you were going, no, you're jumping, you were having a good time. I listened back to the recording. I sounded terrible.
Can't even squat. Microphone's all the way out here.
It's so bad. But I certainly brought that energy. Now, then you learn how to balance the two. But it's...
How do you hustle through a difficult set? Meaning when the music, when that first... You're at a wedding. Let's use a wedding because I think shul's a little different. You're at a wedding, a few hundred people. First note doesn't come out well at the ceremony. How do you hype yourself back to get to it? I don't know hype. I don't know what the answer is about hype or whatever.
So it's happened, obviously. You know, let's say
the sound is not what you thought it was going to be quality wise or any of that stuff, and you kind of have to.
So that could always be nerve wracking, right? If the sound is a little bit off, and it's not even necessarily your vocal, but it's the sound that's like. You just gotta smile and keep just doing you while you're singing, while they're figuring it out, because they will figure it out. And you don't ever want to be that guy who's like scowling like that. You don't want to be.
Actually, my wife and I've actually mentioned this to my wife. We were once at a wedding, a huge Jewish wedding, huge, and they just blew the power off the place.
Right
in the middle, the guy starts singing, and just the whole power goes out. I actually think that's easier as a singer than bad sound.
Yeah, because of course it is.
Okay, you smile, you make like maybe a joke about it, and then everyone starts singing with you, and nobody expects it to be of any quality because there's no power.
Right. You just keep singing, and like people will remember that moment.
But now, I'm saying now you start singing, and it's not because of you. It sounds horrible. What do you do?
You just keep going, because there's nothing really you could do about it. If there's a break, I'll maybe go over to the sound guy and say, hey, listen, something doesn't sound right, but you try to always do it respectfully, obviously. You never want to mess up. You never want to mess with
all the power.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with the sound guy. But you always try. But like on a personal note, when you get there, and let's say you're on a back-to-back or you weren't feeling well, right? Sometimes you get hired months in advance. You don't know that you're not going to feel well, but you don't feel well. But you still show up and you still do your job. And maybe your vocals are not where you want them to be. I've had that. And you just, you take a breath, you try to remember your breathing, you try to remember your technique, and you do the best you can. Are you sometimes going to sound a little bit off? it's gonna happen. I'm sure every singer would say that they've had off days and they've had moments, but I think that even on my most off day, I was able to get through it.
What was it like when you got your first wedding? How'd it feel? Meaning, what I mean is, like, were you actively looking for it? You were throwing your name out there. You had demos. I don't know how it works. And then someone finally says, like, I want you. I mentioned this on a different episode. There's a relatively famous Jewish singer. His name is Barry Weber. Maybe one day he'll be on it. So I was his first ever out-of-town wedding.
Oh, really?
And he was so, maybe it was just because it was my wedding that I felt that his energy was through the roof. But I remember running into him. It was out of town. So, like, there was a room in the hotel with, like, before the wedding, like, drinks and cookies and fruit for anyone from out of town that arrived a little bit early. And I remember walking in there and seeing him. And he was, like, giddy. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I don't particularly know who you are. Like, I never heard of the guy before. Someone suggested it and was like, oh, you know, if this is the vibe you're going for, but you don't want to break the bank on flying someone or whatever, this is your guy. And it's funny because now whenever I see him at weddings, like, the joke is that my mother-in-law especially, but I remind him of this. And he's like, he doesn't, like, owe me anything, but it's, like, funny how, like, this guy became famous. And I remember him, like, being so happy that the wedding was ending late and there was an offer on the table to stay over and not red-eye back that night. Like, I remember how happy he was. Like, oh my gosh, you guys would do that for me? I remember speaking to him before the wedding. It was like, now he's, like, world famous. So.
Yeah, he's world famous. How did I feel when I got my first wedding? I'm trying to remember, like, what I would consider my first wedding. Like, there was the first wedding that I did with, like, you know, one-man band style, and then there's the first wedding that I did with, like, a full band. But I think even that, you know, that first wedding with a one-man band, I think it may have been Ellie Wax. And I think it was, like, a day after my niece's wedding, my nephew's wedding, like, back in, like, 2018. It just, like, I was just like, okay, this is real. Like, I've been doing Havdalah. I was doing Shabbos. I was doing Havdahs. And I was getting a call for a chuppah. I had always done my friends' chuppahs. And then all of a sudden it was a wedding that they didn't know me. And somehow they got to me and I ended up singing their full kid's wedding. And I was ecstatic. I was, like, super excited. Like, okay, I'm here. And this is going to be great. And I remember, like, just feeling that moment. And it was really incredible. I do remember that. I remember finally on it. Now I'm, like, smiling about it.
But that's one of the things that we talk about is a lot of people quit just short of that dream. And again, I don't think it's a full-time job. I don't think it's, you're not making Jay-Z type money. Obviously, I don't think. At least maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not.
Not yet.
Confirmed.
Not yet. Confirmed. Not yet. But it's like, how many people would have stopped just short of that? How many people would have said, I won't put my name out there? How many people would have said, I won't go for that? And now it's taken off, dude. You have gigs like, I want to get to that, and I want to get to a different part of the hustle in a second, but, like, you have gigs all the time. So it's like you started performing after you were married. Now I'm pivoting. It, like, really took off.
Shabbos I had started doing a little bit before I got married. So a little bit before I ever met my wife even. Like,
so how does that go on the dating thing? By the way, my goal is, if this works out, I'll be gone 4 nights a week during busy season, 3 nights a week during the fair season. But don't worry, there's always, you're a part of it. And the 3 weeks, don't worry, you'll always have me during the 3 weeks.
Right.
Unless I'm doing an acapella kumsitz. So, but besides that, yeah.
So I think it gets back to what I was, like, that story I was going to tell you before, just, like, how this happened. I never thought that this was gonna be what it is. So I was in Israel I left the Miami Boys Choir, right? Rachmil had even asked me, like, I went to Israel for high school. I was going out of town. I said, like, I'm done. Oh, just come back for concerts. I said, no. Once I'm done, I'm done. I'm out. And when I got to high school, I was like, okay, yeah, I was a Miami Boys Choir kid. It was a couple years ago. Cool. I get to Israel and, like, I got together with a few friends, Joey Newcomb, Moshe Victor, to name a couple, Moshe Auslander. And
Pre-fame for everybody.
Pre-fame for everybody.
Just making sure, okay.
And we would get, like, asked to come to, like, people's houses for, like, meals. We would all be invited together so that we can make Shabbos miras nice. And it was like, okay, it was a cute little thing. And then we got, like, our first, like, chuppah in Israel, like a random
some
thing.
moshav with no shoes.
Kind of. It was like something like I remember showing up and I'm like, wow, I am overdressed. And we did that chuppah. We did a couple of, like, friends chuppahs in Eretz Israel. But, like, again, I never thought it was going to be anything. We get back to America and we said, like, people always asked us to come and sing at Shabbos. Remember, Effie Tallenblatt was a part of that crew. I'm just, like, remembering all the names. who are coming, and we said like maybe we should do this by Simchas. That you see a lot of times we love Hasidim. We could be like the non-Hasidish version of Mizamrim, like cool. And we started doing it, and I remember like booking our first few gigs, and that's what I thought it was. Few gigs here or there. I got married. I was doing here and there. My wife was coming with me. We had our first kid. They both came with me, and then my wife realized like, why am I coming on gigs with you? You're zero help, and I'm just here with
during the time when I need you during the meals. Right. You actually are performing.
That's
then
when
you actually
working.
Cannot talk to me.
Exactly, and she doesn't know anybody because it's a random family. Sometimes I was like, I'm gonna start like staying by her parents or by my brother who lives in the neighborhood, and that's where I thought it was gonna end. And then we started doing Havdalah, and I ended up becoming like the lead for our group to do the Havdalah. Even though Joey Newcomb was with us. But at the time...
Joey has a different vibe.
It's a very different vibe.
Joey is... You're the Havdalah guy.
Yeah, so I was the Havdalah guy. And Chad Kamenetsky, to his credit...
Second time he's been mentioned on the pod, so we got to get him on the pod.
We got to get him on the pod. He pushed me. He with Aryeh, probably.
Yeah.
He did push me to put out a Havdalah video. He put the whole thing together.
Such a good video.
That was like my first marquee moment. And then I was like, okay, so I'm the Havdalah guy. But then I wanted to somehow transition that to weddings. And he helped me along with that as well. And eventually, he started getting some calls here. I was the good, cheap option for bands. So I was mostly getting calls from them or from people I know. But I would always try if I found that somebody was engaged, as annoying as that could be. I would ask, like, hey, there are people in the neighborhood who will hopefully watch this and be like, yep, he's called me and said, like, if I want him to handle the music, I'm their guy. And, you keep doing that. But I think a part of what you said is, like, when you even said, like, how do you go through those tougher moments when you're at the, how many people would have fell short and not kept going, right? That was part of this. There are plenty of times being a singer is full of rejection. You get said no to a lot more than you get booked. Especially like listen, you say I have a ton of gigs. Baruch Hashem, I have a nice amount, and I'm very happy. Like I know like the number in my head of what I would be very happy to do, and also have my full time job, and that's great. But there's so much rejection that comes along with singing to keep doing it all the time, and my friends and family have heard me say like maybe it's time to just hang it up. Like you're not getting as busy as you want to, but you keep yourself available. You keep saying yes when they come up, and I think what part of it that pushes me towards it, like you mentioned like the money, but the money is not even necessarily a part of it. It's I mean it is certainly, but it's the fact that when I do that, it's the thing that I love to do. Right? I love my job. I have no complaints. My job is great, but singing is something that it's something I love to do. It's something I do on my free time. It's something that I enjoy, and I get to go and do it to make people happy, to sing, sometimes to console people when they need it. But it's just it's that part of you that you get to just give to the world that not many people have an opportunity to do, right? A lot of people have their jobs and they, that's their job. But some people have an opportunity to do something that they could share with other people and share with the world. And I think that is something that, for me, it's something that I love, and it's something that I get to share, and that's what keeps us going. That's what keeps us hustling.
Keeps us hustling. First of all, love that Havdalah video. I imagine that a lot of people told you you're a complete nutcase when you did it. So that's part of it. Part of keep hustling is realizing that if every single person supported what you were doing or thought what you were doing was right, they would do it themselves, and then it wouldn't be your hustle. So I love that video. Your most moving fan or client moment?
Moving fan or client moment. I'm trying to think of things that could come to mind. Most moving. Some of the messages I've gotten, after I put out stuff.
Well, let me just say, Rafainu obviously touched the head chord with me. My father, I think it was in Avelos when it came out.
Right.
From my father. Yeah. I hate to be the one who says this publicly, but you can tell when a musician feels the song. And I don't believe, let me just say this, I don't believe that every musician on every album, every song has to be their favorite song and their passion, because then you wouldn't have albums. You would have one song every 10 years because that's what really speaks to them. But there's some when it's like, okay, I got this. Like this vibe is coming through. But I think of the Havdalah thing too. There was a certain level of emotion, but Rafainu was pretty awesome. Okay, so anyway, we digress.
Yes, obviously that song was very emotional for me, and I remember when you listened to it. I think your father was sick at the time. It was before you were in Avelis.
It could be. When did it come out?
Right before Pesach.
So it was right. It came out right before.
And,
That's what
and
it was.
I remember you texting me something very emotional, and I remember that feeling. And I've gotten messages like that.
The question wasn't to lead about me, just so you know.
Well, I know. I'm saying the messages that I've gotten and some of the stuff I put out have been truly, truly moving. And I think that's some of that fan reaction and client reaction. But there's something that came up recently at a client/fan reaction. So I'll combine the two. I'm sure there's other examples of to answer your question, but this is something that just popped into my head now. Was I got called to do a wedding, and I didn't know who it was. I was booked through a band, and I showed up to the wedding and I saw a whole bunch of people I knew there, and I was like, well, whose wedding is this? I didn't know who it was at the time. Nobody from the client side reached out to me. I was booked solely through the band. And I asked everybody, what are you doing here? And they're like, oh, this is, we won't say the name. This is what's her name's wedding from Hashivenu. Hashivenu is the shul I daven for Rosh Kippur. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's so nice. I'm so appreciative that they booked me. To me, that's where it ended. Like I was the Baal Tefillah. They they liked what I did. I find out after the Kala comes over to me after the wedding. She goes, I just want you to know I'm so happy you're here. I'm like, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. She goes, you should just know that I didn't care about anything else about my wedding. I didn't care where it was. I didn't care when it was. I didn't care about the flowers, the food, nothing. The only thing I said I needed was I need Zalman Pollack at my wedding. That alone was something stirring and emotional and so appreciative to that person. And hopefully more people feel that way. But she said to me, she said,
At Zalman Pollack on all social media platforms.
And she said to me, yeah, do you know why? I said, why? She goes, because for the last 5 years, I've been davening in Hashivenu, Rosh Yom Kippur. And this year specifically, your davening on Rosh Yom Kippur moved me to a place that I don't think I was ever moved before. And I believe it's b'schus that completely that I was able to find my bashert. She was an older single girl. And to me, that just...
Let me just comment just for 1 second. For those those are not religious Jews. So Zalman leading prayers on the high holidays, and the bride basically says that she believes that her prayers were answered to find her husband.
Right,
through her prayer that was inspired by being in the room with you.
Right, which to me was one of the most emotional...
No pressure, though. No pressure next year, though.
Yeah,
no
exactly.
Pressure.
But it was just something that so tremendously moved me, because when you're up there, you're always thinking like, do I sound good? Like, are the songs good? But it goes so much deeper than that. Your ability to influence others and make them feel something could completely change their entire experience of
their life. What do you mean, their whole life?
Their whole life, but their experience of a moment, meaning it's a microcosm of something, right? But yes, this happened to have been a big moment, but in anything that you're doing, if you're putting your all and you're feeling that emotion, and that crowd could be having a completely different experience solely as a result of what you're doing.
I love that. Wow. Zalman, we got to do another episode. It's a lot of fun. I'm not going to ask you the most annoying fan. We're not going to do that. But we have a closing tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational, inspirational quote and what it means to them. So I'll say thank you again for coming in studio. Thank you for joining us. And the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. First of all, I really enjoyed being on here.
A lot of fun.
It's an easy flowing conversation. Hopefully people enjoy it. And
if not, who cares?
Yeah.
We're hustling.
The most motivational quote that comes to mind is Wayne Gretzky / Michael Scott famously said, Michael Scott from The Office, famously said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that, to me, I'm sure you've gotten that on this podcast before. It's a good one, and it's a famous one. But what does it mean to me? It means that if you don't ever, I mean, it's simple. I think it's intuitive what it means. If you don't ever take your shot, or you don't ever try something, you will never know if you will succeed.
100%.
You will never know.
And the one that hits, you'll never get.
And forget it on a selfish level that you'll never know if it will succeed. You never know what you could do for somebody else. Because if you don't take that shot, let's say you have a gift that you could share with the world. If you don't take your shot, you don't know how much you could have impacted somebody, right? My story is an example of it, but anybody could have this, and they could be solely they could be solely responsible for somebody doing something because of the shot that they took.
It's amazing. That is keep hustling.
Let's keep hustling. What's the famous quote from you? Do I get to ask that? Am I allowed to?
I end every episode with a do well by doing good. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling with Zalman Pollack. Remember, do well by doing good, and always keep hustling.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.